Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars. A good morning, good afternoon, a good evening, wherever you are. My name is Amanullah Sand. I facilitate virtual programs at Teacher Development Webinars. Teacher Development Webinars is a social action project to support teachers and educators around the world with professional development opportunities. It is an initiative using the rise in online professional development to connect people from around the world with opportunities which they may not have had due to the all normal of face-to-face conferences. And for this webinar, we are pleased to welcome Penny O today. Penny O was educated at Oxford, Cambridge, and Reading universities. She has 30 years experience as an English teacher in elementary, middle, and high schools in Israel. Now retired, she has started BA and MA courses at Ornham Academic College of Education and Haifa University. She is primarily interested in the practical aspects of effective English language teaching and has presented papers on related topics at TESOL, IRT, TEFL, and other English teachers conferences worldwide. Her books are published by Cambridge University Press and include Grammar Practice Activities, second edition published in 2009, Vocabulary Activities published in 2012, a course in English language teaching published in 2012, Discussions and More published in 2014, and Penny O's 100 teaching tips published in 2013. It's a pleasure having you at Teacher Development Webinars once again, Penny. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars.
Thank you. I'm sharing my screen.
Sure.
Can you make me host, because it says I can't do it at the moment?
Yes, you are host, so you can.
I'm a co-host. Okay, I'll try again. Yes. It says only host, so I don't know why. Ah, here we are. Okay. Right, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I can see also the chat box, so if you have any comments during the session, please feel free. I'll try and keep an eye on what you're saying and respond. I'm also giving my email at the end of the session, so if anyone wants to ask questions which I haven't managed to answer during the session, you can get in touch with me through my email. Okay, I'm talking then today about getting them to talk in English, which was actually the first book I ever wrote for Cambridge was on getting them to talk, because it was the first really difficult problem I came across in class, getting them to talk, and there's all sorts of reasons why it's problematic, and I'm sure you found the same thing in yourselves. It's a challenge because students are reluctant to speak in English. They prefer to stay in their mother tongue. Course books very often don't give many ideas. They tend to focus, coursebooks tend to focus on grammar and vocabulary exercises, or a lot of reading comprehension, writing exercises. They don't give typically many speaking ideas. And then there's a problem of control and discipline and getting the students to speak without losing an orderly classroom. So all sorts of problems here. In this session, I'm going to look at various aspects. Creating a speaking friendly environment. First, it's just sort of an introductory a few comments on that. And then most of the session will be devoted to practical ideas, starting with very, very basic easing in exercise, getting students to talk using brief utterances, and then simple speaking activities, and finally some more advanced ideas. And I'll also at the end of the session give you some references where you can find more. So, okay, here we go, let's go. First, I said I'd talk about creating a speaking friendly environment. In principle, we need to create situations where the students appreciate the importance of learning to speak. The speaking task is within their level. They can do it, they're able to do it. They have a feeling they can succeed. They know their speech will be well received, and the activity is interesting. I'm going to relate to each of these in turn and try to enlarge a little bit on the aspects of each. So students appreciate the importance of learning to speak. Let's start off with that. It's really worth spending, in my experience, a little class time going into mother tongue and talking to students, sharing with them why it's so important to speak in English, and get them on your side. Yes, you're going to want to speak, or I want you to want to speak, just as I want to teach you to speak, because it really is important and you're aware of that. My second point was the language needed is slightly below their current level. If you're looking, say, at the grammar or the reading comprehension texts in your book, they are typically slightly above their present level because you want to increase their vocabulary, increase their knowledge, and therefore you're always drawing them upwards towards a slightly more difficult level than they are at present at. The opposite is true of speaking exercises, which need to be slightly below their current level. It needs to be based on language which they already have control of. This is we're mainly talking about vocabulary here. So you need to make sure that the task requires the use of familiar language or the use of global expressions or chunks that they know, or even texts which they know by heart, or bits which they know by heart. My third point is that they know they can succeed. They need to be what I call success-oriented. So the task has a goal which is clearly achievable. They know, yes, I can do this. I'm not put off by it being too difficult. And it's not too long, and it's simple, and in short, I know I can do it. My fourth point, they know their speech will be well received. So I need to build a supportive classroom climate. This is true, of course, of teaching anywhere, and any subject, but building a supportive classroom climate is really important when you're asking students to speak in a language which is not their own. So the classroom climate, the idea of nodding and smiling when they do speak, being encouraging and smiley, to praise even contributors, echo what they say very often in order to confirm and encourage what they've just said. And finally, I would say don't usually correct. It's not a never, but it's in principle, I think it's important not to correct. The main thing is that they get their message across. If a child has said something, or not necessarily a child, but a student in your class has said something and got their message across in English, they deserve all the praise you can give. And it doesn't matter if they've forgotten the third person S in the present simple, or they've made a pronunciation problem. You can always correct these later. Sometimes you will want to correct as they're speaking, but on the whole, try to refrain from correcting. And my fifth point was the aspect of interest. So it has one or more of the following characteristics. First of all, they know exactly what they've got to do. So a clear, achievable goal. It can be personalized. They're saying things which are meaningful to them, very often expressing their own ideas, opinions, and so on. Using games, but games as such are not necessarily a good idea. They can be good, they can be time wasting, so you have to be very careful when using games. But if you can employ game-like challenges within a speaking activity, the students are much more likely to be motivated to participate and enjoy it and have fun. Visual materials are important. And finally, the use of what I call language play, not necessarily exchanging, crossing an information gap or actually making teaching each other something or informing each other, but actually playing with ideas, sort of jokes or half serious ideas. And I'll give some examples as we go on. So on now to the practical aspects. And so, as I said, most of the session will be taken up on practical aspects. Yes, Fernando, thank you for your contributions in the chat box. Yeah, I think personalizing is really good. Now I'll be showing some ideas on how to do this later. So first of all, my first idea is to use your standard vocabulary and grammar exercises in your text, which are not designed to encourage speaking. They're designed to practice new vocabulary, but they can be made into speaking activities by some fairly easy, simple strategies. So here's an example on your screen, a vocabulary exercise practicing particular verbs and nouns. Okay, so they're asked to link, throw a ball, wear a shirt, and so on to show they've understood. Now, if I want them to speak, to practice speaking, I can enlarge or extend the challenge here by taking out one column and asking students to improvise their own matches. For example, you can, and I've taken out ball and shirt and so on, and I've just left in the verb, you can throw, and I invite the students to call out or raise their hands and say anything they can think of that they can do with any of these verbs. So they might say, you can throw a ball, but you can also throw a stone, and you can throw a piece of wood, and you can throw all sorts of things. You can wear a shirt, yes, but you can wear a hat, and you can wear shoes, and you can wear all sorts of things. You can break, and really there's lots of things you can break. So you're encouraging them to say all sorts of things which are their own thing. They are expressing real ideas, and not limited to what the textbook said. You can also, of course, delete the other column. What can you do with a house, an email, a ball, a shirt, a glass? And they can suggest their own ideas for what you can do with each of these things, either calling out as they think of them, or even working in groups, or all sorts of ways. But the main thing is that they are saying their own thing. Same sort of thing you can do with gapful exercises. Here's a grammar exercise on past tense. So supposing, again, it's a question of deleting and allowing them to make their own responses. So they have to say here, she left early, he made the cake, I sat there, the man read the book. Actually, the more intelligent students won't bother to read the sentence at all. They'll just get the idea that all they need to do is take the verb in parenthesis and put it into the past tense without bothering to understand the meaning of the sentence. If, however, you do something like this, deleting the end of the sentence, so like this, she, and they have to put the past tense, so that you're still practicing your past tense, she left, but they can end it any way they like. So it comes like this, and they say, she left the room, she left early, she left late, she left her husband, she left whatever. And they can make the same sorts of things with other things. Isabel asks what kind of communicative activities beginner students do. The same sort of thing as I'm suggesting here. If you use a very, very simple grammar or vocabulary exercise and just delete part of it. And I'll come on later to some simple beginner student exercises, Isabel, which I hope will answer your question. Or another variation on the same exercise. So instead of deleting the end of the sentence, you leave the end of the sentence, but delete the verb, and they put in any verb they like. So he the cake, he made the cake, he burnt the cake, he bought the cake, he ate the cake. There are all sorts of possibilities here. And again, they throw out all sorts of ideas and you get them talking. Basically, the idea is making textbook exercises open-ended, possibility of all sorts of right answers, rather than closed-ended, which most of the exercises originally are. So if you're doing a matching exercise, you delete one of the columns and I challenge them to invent their own completions. If it's a gap fill or sentence completion, you delete the Q in parentheses or the word bank. Sometimes, as you know, exercises have word banks. Or if it's multiple choice, you leave the stem and delete the options and ask them to suggest their own answers. The principle is that almost any standard grammar or vocabulary exercise can be made into a simple oral interaction exercise by opening it to multiple responses. I had a look at some of the materials used in Pakistan, and here is an example of a Pakistani a grammar exercise on the past continuous, and it's closed-ended, as you say. They have to say Salim was washing his face at 7 p.m. Salim was drinking tea. And here again, just a random exercise, you can make it into a speaking exercise by deleting things. So, for example, can you suggest what Salim was playing at 6 p.m.? It says playing, but they can suggest he was playing basketball, he was playing football, he was playing cricket, he was playing chess, whatever. And they can, with the other ones, the same sort of thing. You can go further and delete Salim. Instead of that, say I. What was I doing? And they say what they were doing at particular times of the day and share. Or they can write in for themselves what they were doing at different times and challenge other members of the class to guess what they were doing at particular times. So this is just an illustration of the kind of thing you can do with a grammar exercise. The advantages are short, fairly structured responses, which are very easy, familiar, and opportunity for modeling by the first responders. Normally, when you do an exercise, the first people to answer are the more confident and advanced students. In this case, if they respond to an open-ended question, they're providing a model which the other responders can use in order to make their own responses. It also means that all responses are meaningful, as opposed to the first example I gave on the original gap fill using the past tense, where they didn't really need to understand the sentence in order to fill in the correct past tense. Yes, Emil says, open-ended questions eliminate controlled practice stage of grammar vocabulary teaching. Yes, I'm not saying that controlled practice is bad. I think it has a place. It is important, but I think it's also important to do the open-ended, creative, personalized responses as well. Other advantages of this kind of open-ended practice is that it's successful. They tend to get it right, and it can sometimes produce amusing responses, which everybody enjoys. So it's much more enjoyable. To carry on then, and here I'm coming on to Isabel's question about elementary learners or younger beginners. One very useful strategy, sorry, I'm going to go back a second to this screen, basing activities on chunks which the students have learned by heart. Particularly chants. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Carolyn Graham's work on what she calls jazz chants. I don't call them jazz chants, I just call them chants, because Carolyn is very much into jazz, which I'm not. And those of you, I see Isabel knows it, but I hope many others of you will click on the link and look at the YouTube here, get into the idea, and look at other books by Carolyn Graham. Here she is. I was privileged to hear a session by her many years ago in Japan, and she is absolutely inspiring. I'll show you an example in a moment, but they use natural language, natural rhythm, and they're age appropriate. Here's one for beginners, which I invented, but based on templates given by Carolyn. Hi, Lou, how are you? Hi, Lou, how are you? Hi, Kate, I'm feeling great. And how are you? So it has a rhythm which they can clap or use or click their fingers, but it replicates the rhythm of natural speech. It's very, very easy. And it has some useful chunks which they learn and remember, and they can later use in their own discourse. Actually, I find chants are much more easy to implement, to transfer into natural discourse than are songs, because they are without they're actually saying the expressions or the phrases in the same way you'd say them in normal speech. So how are you is a useful chunk to learn by heart, and I'm feeling great also is a useful phrase. Can be performed in chorus or in groups. Very useful, as I say, interactive chunks. Sylvia, yes, her books are still available, very much so, published by Oxford University Press. You can find them on the internet. Yes, Fernando uploaded a reference to something I published in Israel. It's basically very similar to what I'm going to present in this presentation. So I'm not sure you need it, but you might like to look at it as a backup. Replicate the rhythm of normal speech, no possibility of making mistakes, the things you've learned by heart. And shy, if they're doing it in chorus, shy students who never normally open their mouths will open them and speak, because they're sort of under the shelter of the whole class who are saying it with them. So it really helps the shyer students opening their mouths. Later, they can do it in pairs or small groups, or even on their own. And here is a link to books by Carolyn Graham, and just write Carolyn Graham in double quotation marks into Google, and it'll take you to all her stuff. To move on from chants to dialogues, dialogues also are things which are learned by heart, and really simple things, but again, using useful phrases which they can then use in their own speech at a very basic level at the beginning. So, are you ready? Yes, I am. Okay, just that. Or, Amna, do you like apples? Yes, I do. Asma, do you like pizza? No, I don't. Salim, do you like something? And so on around the class, asking each other about what kinds of food they like. And having learned the dialogues by heart, there's all sorts of things you can do with them. A chain, as I said, one student asking another, and then that student asking someone else, and so on around the class. Or a time limit. We do the chain around the class, and then I say, okay, that took you 5 minutes. Let's do it again. See if you can do it in 3 minutes, or see how quickly you can do it. And then they do the same again, but speaking much more fast and fluently. And they're getting lots of lovely practice in saying these useful chunks, and highly motivating and quite fun. And they always do break their time limit, so it's a success-oriented exercise. Or accumulating, so each student has to repeat what the student said before them, as well as their own contribution, and it gradually gets more and more and more until they can't remember it all, and then you start again. Or let's move on to more dramatic dialogues, like the one you see on your screen. The ones I showed before are sort of fairly standard, not particularly interesting ones, and you make them interesting by the kinds of things you do with them. This has built-in drama in it, and you can ask them to express it angrily or hastily or surprised, or using emotion, expressing their emotions. Samara, yes, I'm going to talk about more advanced stuff as well in a moment. I have to try and cover everyone in an hour, and it's a pretty challenging challenge. Okay, so here's a dramatic dialogue. or at a more advanced level, this also dramatic or interesting situation, which they can discuss later, performed in all sorts of ways. So it can be performed by two groups, one group playing 1A and one group playing B, or pairs practicing on their own, or volunteer pairs displaying before the class. The advantages of dialogues, of course, are first they're fun and entertaining, but they're also very morale boosting, because when they're performing these dialogues, they are actually communicating in English and in good English, and they're not making mistakes. So they're feeling good about it. And another side effect, advantage, is that they are accumulating a vocabulary of very useful interactive chunks used in informal conversation. So I said various ways of doing this. Can do it fast, slow, loud, soft. They find it really fun. I mean, it's not particularly communicative or authentic, but it does get them talking and enjoying. For example, come here at once, to do it fast. Come here at once. Who, me? Yes, you. Or come here at once. And they're doing it in all sorts of different ways and getting more and more practice in saying and expressing themselves using the dialogue. Similarly, variation in characterization. Do it sadly, do it happily, play it as a relationship between a teacher and a student, or a mother and her daughter, or whatever. At a slightly more advanced level, adding and changing the text, or, as I did for many years with my elementary classes, developing them into an entire sketch or play which they perform to parents at the end of the year. I don't know how many of you have heard of readers' theatre. Readers' theatre is a technique used quite a lot in the States, where a scene or small play is performed by members of the class, where they actually are reading aloud the text. They have the text in front of them, they're reading it. They don't need to learn by heart their parts, but they rehearse it, so they're pretty fluent when they're reading, and they can think about how they're saying things and how they are expressing the meanings. So it's students rehearsing and performing a text they read aloud. Usually the conventional readers' theatre is a dramatized story with parts and maybe one of them functioning as a narrator. But the way I've done it in my classes, it doesn't have to be a play. Almost any shortish text will do. I very often take a paragraph out of a reading comprehension text which they've learned and they know, so they know what it means. And I say, okay, take this paragraph, 4 lines, 5 lines, 6 lines, depends on the level of the class, and rehearse it, prepare it. Each student gets a copy of the text and they rehearse it. And I'm going to tell you have 10 minutes to rehearse, and then you're going to read aloud the text to the rest of the class. Everyone has to participate, but you have to think about how you are going to read it so that it has maximum meaning and impact on the rest of the class. It has to be dramatic and interesting. So you can use solo or choral speech, speak louder or softer, faster or slower. You can use movement, you can use gesture, you can use pause, you can even repeat parts of the text if you like, and it comes out dramatic. And what I found interestingly is that when I do this in class, no two groups do it the same way. It all comes out very varied, and it is true they are reading aloud a text, and it's not their own text, but they are becoming very fluent in reading. So it actually contributes to reading as well as to oral fluency. It can be used in any class. As I say, different groups always produce different interpretations. It improves fluency, and often students find they actually do remember, because they've been rehearsing and reading it a lot. They remember chunks of the script later, which again feed into their own repertoire of useful chunks of language. Easing in 3, I'm going to talk about scaffolding. Scaffolding activities. Samara, I'm glad you've been using Reader's Theatre. Try using my variation of it and see how it works in your class. Scaffolded activities means activities which have some kind of scaffolding or support or framework, which makes it easier for students to express themselves. So using, as it says here, familiar structure or pattern which students can use as a basis to construct their own variations. For example, I suppose guessing games is the most obvious example, where it's all based on yes-no questions of various kinds, but there are other ones like find someone who, or class surveys where they're making the questions themselves. Let's look at guessing games here based on yes-no statements or questions like these ones which you see on your screen. All sorts of guessing, whether it's something I've got in my bag. For elementary classes, what's in my bag? And they guess, is it a something? Is it a something? Is it a something? And they're guessing all sorts of words they already know in order to find out what you have in your bag, but it's purposeful and it's interactive. Or what's in the picture? I hide a picture, or I flash it at them for a second, or I show it to them blurred on the screen, and they have to try and guess what it is. What's my job? I have an imaginary job, and see if they can guess what my job is. Who am I? I'm a famous person or someone they all know from the local context, and they have to say, are you or do you, in order to guess who I am. What am I doing based on mime? All these are possibilities. I'm sure you know more as well, but basically they're all based on a scaffolded, a clear structure of the yes-no questions. Find someone who, students have a set of questions to ask each other, so they need a little worksheet for this, and they have to note down the students who answer yes to their questions. So questions like, for example, find someone who chews chewing gum. Find someone who has been in a road accident. Find someone who has a dog or has another pet, whatever. And they go around and ask, do you have, do you chew, have you been, whatever the appropriate question is. Again, it's purposeful but scaffolded interaction. For more advanced classes, and here we're coming on to the question about undergraduates or higher level school students, I asked them first of all, write down privately on a piece of paper a chore you hate doing, your favorite place, and something that annoys you. And having written that down, they get up and move around the class and see if they can find other people in the class who feel the same way they do about these three things. You can vary the original questions, of course, as you like, but find someone else who hates the same chore you hate, or find someone who has a similar favorite place to you. It gets them talking. As it said, it's rather more advanced than the previous ones I showed you, but it is interactive and still slightly scaffolded. I'm now moving on to simple speaking activities, which are not scaffolded, but which require students to say fairly simple things. So we're still at elementary or intermediate level, where there's no preset learned text or scaffolding, but the sentences they're asked to produce are at their level or even slightly below and are not too long. So here's one. This is, I said, game-like activities. One or two students stand with their back to the class, the board, and on the board is a list of words they need to guess. These can have been written up by you or shown using a projector. The rest of the class give hints without mentioning the target word itself. So, and this can be played in teams. So supposing you put on the board a list of sports and the two students come from one team. The class is divided into two teams. Two students come from one team, stand with their back to the board, and the rest of their team give them hints in order to get them to guess what the items are as quickly as possible. And then another list is put up for two representatives from the other team who also have to give hints to get their guessers to guess the words. And there's lots of talk going on. Exactly what they say, as I say, is not scaffolded in the way I showed in the previous activities, but they are simple sentences, and they're not allowed, of course, to mime. In this case, they have to say in English what the sport is or what it does, or any hint they can give to get their representative to guess it. Conjecturing is another group of simple activities, like guessing, except there's no one right answer. It's a sort of brainstorm of all sorts of possibilities. And it's based on statements rather than questions. And the class or you may decide which is the best answer. Anyway, let's look at an example for an elementary class, beginner class. I do a doodle on the board. And the students have to guess what they think this is. Well, give me a break a moment and write up in the chat box what you think this might be. What do you think your students might guess it might be? Your question about, do these things work in crowded classes? Yes, they do. Yes, they can work also in big classes. An egg. Okay, scrambled egg. Donut. Yes. Okay, let's get away from egg and think of any other ideas. A potato, maybe. A monster's eye. Very nice. Donut again. Yes. Parasite. A virus. What about a hat viewed from above, for example? Pregnancy. Okay, so they come up with all these ideas, and instead of writing them in the chat box, they are saying them, and you've got a lot of talk going on. A lot of talk, which is what I want. I want my students to speak a lot, and brainstorming like this gets them to speak a lot. Slightly more advanced, same idea. A picture of an interesting person on the screen or in their books or even on paper. What do you think? Put them into groups and ask them what you think you can deduce from this person just from looking at them. You might suggest they might think about a name, a nationality, an age, a profession, things that the person likes to do, the problems the person has, any ambitions or anything about them that you can think of. And in their groups, they discuss what they think this person is like, and then they come together and compare whether they thought she was the same nationality, or they had different nationalities, different personalities, and so on. So that's, again, fairly simple conjecturing activity. Another simple speaking activity is based on picture dictations, which I used a lot in my elementary class, particularly. Students dictate a picture to the teacher, and you have to draw it on the board. Now, it doesn't matter if you can't draw. In fact, it's better if you can't draw. You do it as well as you can, and they laugh at your attempts, but that you write what they are saying, and they are motivated to speak because whatever they say is going to be drawn by you on the board. A variation, of course, is to put them into pairs and tell them to dictate to each other, taking turns to tell each other what to draw on a common picture, or dictating different pictures to each other. There's all sorts of variations on this one. A favorite of mine is called Say Things About a Picture. Again, it's non-scaffolded but easy utterances. In groups, students say as many things as they can about a picture in 2 minutes. So I display a picture like this, for example, and say, okay, in your groups, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. One member of the group writes a little tick or check for each sentence or even phrase that anybody says. You don't have to write out what anybody says because this is an oral fluency exercise. I'm not interested in writing at this point. Just check for every sentence anybody says. And when I stop you at the end of 2 minutes, I want to know how many checks you have. And they finish after 2 minutes, and I say stop, and how many do you have? And they say, I've got 10, 15, 20, whatever. I say, okay, now I'm going to show you another picture. And I want you to do the same again, but break your previous record. And believe me, they speak and speak and speak and speak, and they get a lot of talking here, but it's very simple, it's very easy, and it is supported by the visual. Okay, I haven't got time to read a long contribution here about a discussion, but the rest of you can look at it. It looks, from what I can see, it looks a really interesting one for a more advanced class, of course. Lovely, thank you very much. So here is a summary of what I just said in writing, so you can look at it perhaps it's clearer in writing than it was when I spoke. Okay. This activity is very easy and interesting to do. I've never had it fail. Because, first of all, it's very simple language. They have a choice of what they say. So it's open-ended, and if there's something in the picture they don't know how to say, they simply don't relate to it. They have to relate to things that they do know how to say. It's collaboration. They're helping each other to get good results, and it's game-like. It feels like a game. There's a sort of adrenaline rush as you're trying to say as much as you can in the 2 minutes, knowing that the clock is ticking away and you've got limited time. So let's say as much as we can in the time. And a feeling of success when you actually manage to break your own record. I don't like competitions so much. I like this one because it's competing against yourself, which is a nice thing to do. More advanced speaking activities then, to come on to the question about undergraduates or higher level speakers in the class, which demand original expression without models, but still a task preferably based on a clear goal rather than discuss the following topic. Discuss a topic, in my experience, is much less successful than talk to each other in order to achieve some kind of task. I'll give some examples in a moment. Brainstorming, for example. How many uses can you find for a pen? Put them into groups and they think of as many uses as they can, and then you bring them together again and compare the ideas they found. Or how many associations can you find between two objects? Or How many things can you find in common with your partner that you didn't know before, or that you can't see by just looking at them? This is a good icebreaker, incidentally, with a new class at university or high school, putting them into pairs and asking them how many things can you find in common with your partner, and then share in the full class. Or here's an interesting picture. What's the story behind it? Find as many explanations as you can. All sorts of brainstorming activities, but at a more advanced level. The next family of advanced exercise is based on reaching a consensus on some kind of problem. So it's sort of all the committee type exercises come under this heading. So you're given, say, a statement or set of controversial statements, and decide if the group agrees or disagrees, or maybe if you can change the statement so that it's something which everyone agrees with, or a dilemma, the group decides what should be done. I'll give you some references for actual statements and dilemmas you can use later. Candidates, there's a description of 4 or 5 candidates. The group decides who is the most suitable to get a job or to win a prize or something. Or priorities, the group, you give them a list of, for example, qualities of a teacher, and they decide what is the most important, what's the next most important, and so on. Assembling information is another family of advanced activities, like creating and administering a survey, for example, television viewing habits, or planning an event together, planning a school outing or a school party, setting up an ideal school. What would be your ideal school? Can you suggest? How it would be run and what its curriculum would be, and all sorts of things. Or designing a profile of an ideal something, teacher, for example, they know all about, or student or parent, but it could be anything. It could be to do with whatever they are studying in university, for example, an ideal nurse or an ideal doctor or something. Finally, I want to come on to presentations. Students present singly or in pairs, and it doesn't have to be research. It can be all sorts of different things. It could be presenting a story, telling a story of all the different kinds you could see on your screen there. Or it could be instructions, something the student is an expert in or knows how to do, and the other student perhaps not so well, how to do something. And again, some examples on your screen. Or presenting information, and here's where the research project comes in, but it could also be something I happen to know about and I want to tell you about, or even presenting myself. Various questions I'm sometimes asked about presentations. Do you allow them to read aloud from the screen? Do you allow them to learn by heart? What about working in pairs using PowerPoint? What about recording? I'm just going to relate to these briefly, and this is the last section of my talk, and I hope we'll still have a few minutes left for questions or comments. So reading aloud, I would say I don't usually allow this because I want them to talk fluently, so I tell them to, jumping now to the use of PowerPoint, use your PowerPoint as I did here. Occasionally reading aloud bits of it, yes, but mostly using it as cues or notes for my own improvisation, for your improvisation. Learning by heart, certainly not allowing them to learn by heart the entire presentation, but learning chunks of it is I think, legitimate and can be helpful. For example, learning by heart that final sentence that they can end up smoothly. Working in pairs, certainly, I think that's very helpful. They can support each other, and one of them does some of the presentation and another does another part of it. And finally, the point about recording, recording is a really useful technique because having each student do a presentation in class is very, very time consuming and can be tedious. So ask them to record their presentation at home and send it to you through WhatsApp or through all sorts of tools online you can use, is a very useful way of enabling them to give their presentation that it's much less stressful for them because they're recording it at home and they can delete a recording, do a new one if it doesn't work too well, and send it to you, and you can check it at your leisure and give them feedback. So recording is a really useful thing to do with presentations rather than doing the presentations online. Okay, I said I'd give you references. These two books, the one on the right-hand side is mine. Sorry, it's a little bit blurred. Discussions and More, which includes the various ideas I've given in this session, but also a lot more. And Keep Talking, an old book, but a classic, and it's brilliant, by Friederike Klippel. And that has, for example, the list of controversial statements I spoke about and a whole lot of other things as well. So I really recommend these two books. And here's my email, as I promised, and time for questions. So Fatima, anybody wants me to send the slides, please send me an email. But I think, Amanola, I think the presentation may be available from your website. Can you say?
Sure, if you allow it, we can put them on our website. And yes, thanks very much for the wonderful talk. And now the floor is open for the question and answers. If you have any questions, please feel free to share in the chat.
Questions or comments or your own contributions is fine. Yes.
Yeah. So I was saying this, that in the chat there was a question, and that in Pakistani context we have large classrooms. So how about the large classrooms? Do you think these activities can work well with large classrooms as well?
Large classrooms, I think you have to use a lot of group work, and it can be problematic organizing group work, getting in and out of groups. But if you don't use group work, then they're just not going to have time really to for each student to speak. Okay, if you're a class of 40, or I don't know how large are your classes? I don't know, 40, 50, more.
Well, in some classes we have 60, 70, even 100.
Wow. So you really need to put them into groups to do the activities. But some of the full class brainstorms would not be practical. And yes, I think that's my only answer to that. But I think all of the ideas that I've given here can be done in groups as well as in full class.
Great. And has another question. Will an early start to picking up communication skills help more than in trying to do the same with adult learners? Would introducing small talk early on help promote the development of fluency in our learners? Sorry,
didn't get that. Can you say it again?
Yes, so it's about will introducing small talk early on help promote the development of fluency in our learners?
I still can't understand. I'm sorry, my hearing is not very good.
Okay.
Can you
express it
yes, briefly and
simply? Yes, it's about picking up communication early on. Do you think it's
hands-on communication?
Yes, but communication, picking up communication early on. The earlier the better.
The earlier the better. Yes, I'm not in favor of teaching English at a very young age. I think that if they start at the age of 9, 10, 11, that's fine. And a lot of the ideas I've given here are appropriate for younger students as well, particularly the dialogues and chants. I think they're really useful for younger learners.
I think and the questions are coming up again and again around motivation and getting them to talk. But I think in your whole presentation you've answered most of them already. So yeah, I have a question from Kado from Algeria, and she asks that, does talking accurately differs from talking fluently as far as beginners are concerned?
Does speaking, what, sorry?
Yes, does talking accurately differs from speaking fluently?
Speaking accurately and speaking fluently.
Yeah.
What I've been talking about here in this class is the fluency. Okay, I haven't really been relating to accuracy. And in the context of speaking, accuracy is much less important. I said I don't think you necessarily need to correct them or make sure they're speaking accurately. But the more they speak, and the more they listen, the more they interact, the more accurate they are likely to become. So it does indirectly contribute to accuracy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Has another interesting question from I think Ardian from Brazil, and she asks, when should we stop pushing a student to talk in class? What are the signs that they are about to break?
When should you? Stephen Krashen says you shouldn't push them at all. When they're ready, they'll speak. I think you need. I think you do need to put a little bit of pressure on them, invite them to speak, but to make it as easy as you can for them to speak. But if they are, and each teacher, I think you use your own teaching judgment here. You get a feel for when a student is just unable to, and then I would just leave them alone and let them not speak. I don't think you need to press them too much, and maybe have a little chat with them after the class and talk with them about under what circumstances, how you can help them to improve their speech and actually contribute.
Mm-hmm. We are having such a diverse audience. I'm trying to pick questions from each and every country. So yeah, has one from Azerbaijan.
Yeah, there's a question here about taboo, controversial topics. It's a big problem, yes, and I think you need to avoid them as far as you can. Not only taboo, but also ones which might be distressing to particular students in the class. And you need to use all your sensitivity to know what topics are best avoided and what are not. And I can't say anything more specific than that. It really depends on your particular class and on your own relationship with the students. The better we know the students, the more obviously we're able to decide what topics might not be appropriate for that class.
That's right. So Elzana asks, when is it okay to allow students use first language?
Sorry?
So yes, so Elzana asks that when is it okay to allow students to use first language?
To use their mother tongue, yes.
Yep.
Very good question, very important. On the whole, what we're trying to do is get them to speak in English, not in mother tongue. But if they occasionally use mother tongue, I would accept that. I don't think it's a disaster. What we need to try to do is make sure that most of the time they're speaking in English. And if occasionally they use mother tongue, that's fine. I would encourage them, if there's something they want to say and there's a word there which they don't know how to say in English, I'd say, well, say the whole sentence in English, and when you come to the word you don't know, say it in your mother tongue and I'll translate it for you. Most of you listening to this seminar and me in my own home context, most of us speak our students' language, so we have no problem doing that. For teachers teaching multilingual classes is a bit more problematic.
That's wonderful. Thanks for answering that. And we have other questions from Meco Antonio from Mexico. And he asked, what is the role of using educational technology in this context? Do students learn better using technology?
No, I don't think they do. I think students learn best by face-to-face interaction. But this is a controversial topic. I'm not going to get into this too much. I think the technology can be really helpful when face-to-face is not a practical option. One place is, for example, I mentioned, for example, recording presentations rather than giving them face-to-face. So using the technology to record in very large classes when students cannot possibly all contribute. So recording their, not even presentations, but recording their contributions to any particular task using WhatsApp and sending it to you can be really helpful. So yes, there is a role for technology when you can't manage face-to-face. I don't think it's superior to face-to-face, but it is a fallback, an important means of solving problems.
Mhm. I see this question from you, Nanda, from Myanmar, and it's about translation. How important the translation is? Are they supposed to translate every word for the students?
How important is translation?
Yeah.
I think it's a useful technique. I don't think you need to use it all the time, or I don't think you should use it all the time. As I said, in the context of speaking, teaching them to speak, it's important to use English, obviously, as much as possible. I've already said I don't think that using a mother tongue or translating is a total taboo, but I think it should be minimized. Yeah, certainly you don't need to translate every word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other question from Farzana Najib from Islamabad, Pakistan. And she asks, why is there a fear of speaking English formally or informally? What was your strategy to reduce the fear and build confidence?
Yes, I think this very much relates. I don't know if the person who asked the question was in the first part of my talk, because I related very much to this issue right at the beginning of the talk, and you may have missed it. It's really important to build their confidence and encourage them to speak, because it can be really, really difficult for some students to express themselves in English, to be willing to, as it were, expose themselves, and the fear of making mistakes and so on, by reassuring them as much as possible, making sure that the activities are as success-oriented as possible, making them short and easy and doable, and to provide all the encouragement and smiles and support that we can in our own classroom with the students. I think it's a really important question, and can't really answer it, do it justice in a short answer. It's an important question.
Yes. Next question from Olesia. She asks, when it comes to the approach of scaffolding, should we anyhow after the way we do it in accordance with the students' level and age?
Sorry, so are these doing what with the students' level and age?
Yes, she's asking about scaffolding, accordance with the students' level and age.
I didn't get the first word.
So she says she's asking about scaffolding.
Scaffolding, yeah.
Yep.
Yes, again, this is according to the level and the age. I think the younger the students, the more elementary their level, the more they need the scaffolding and the support of the language. Yeah. So
yes, so Sonika asks that oftentimes when students of EFL speak, they have a heavy accent because of a mother tongue influence, and they may often mispronounce. How to reduce that? Is there correct one pronunciation in English? What's your take on accent? This this thing about sound English.
It's an interesting question, important one. First of all, she wrote a direct message to me saying, is there one correct pronunciation in English? And the answer is no, there isn't. The crucial criteria is, will this be comprehensible? And it doesn't matter if they have an accent, as long as it's internationally comprehensible, not necessarily to me or to Amanola, but to anybody who speaks English as an international language. Is my accent going to be so heavy that it's making me incomprehensible, or is it going to be just an accent that we take into account because people who speak English today speak it with all sorts of different accents? So I don't think it really matters which accent you're using, as long as it is comprehensible. Now, if your student has a very heavy accent which makes them difficult to understand, you will need to take time out to practice the problematic sounds that they're getting wrong. But otherwise, I wouldn't worry. I just, as long as they're getting the idea across and they're comprehensible, that's fine. And thank you very much, incidentally, for your kind comments in the chat box. I'm enjoying them.
Yes. So the next question is very interesting from Franklin. He says, how do you make sure that the fast learners do not overtake the conversation and allow others to speak?
Yeah. Sometimes you just need to be a bit unkind and say, please, to the dominant students, can you keep quiet for a moment in order to allow other students to speak, but to do this tactfully and supportively, and maybe even outside the classroom say, can you try to talk a little bit less so that the other students can speak more? It is a problem and you need to deal with it tactfully and carefully in order to not hurt anybody's feelings. But I know it's happened to me as well, that I had these dominant students just taking over, and it's not a situation you can tolerate. So you need to deal with it, as I say, tactfully, but assertively, I think. Okay, we're getting near the end of our time, I should imagine.
Yes, so I don't see any other questions, and if there are, they can email to you. And yes, so thank you very much, Tani, for this wonderful talk, and we always appreciate having you at Teacher Development Webinars. Thanks for sharing all the wonderful tips and strategies and all the wisdom and all your experience. And that really means a lot having you at Teacher Development Webinars. It was wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much indeed. And to the rest of you, thank you very much for your participation. And please feel free to email me if there are any questions you've asked which I haven't had time to answer, or any other thing you want to, anything else you want to say to me or share or ask. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for this recording. This recording will be available at Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel. Please don't forget to share and subscribe. And for the certificate, so the webinar, attending the webinar is free, but for certificate, you have to pay some, from Pakistan, some 300 Pakistani rupees, or if you're from abroad, international users, participants can pay $5 only. And we are available on Teacher Development Webinars, social media platforms. We are available on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. And this recording will also be available at Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel. For future webinars, you can register at website www.tdwebinars.org. Please don't forget to share your takeaways from this webinar with hashtag TDWebinars, and don't forget to tag us at TDWebinars on Twitter. It was wonderful to having you. Thanks very much. Be safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.